You're pathetic, Jonathan. I can replace you in 24 hours with a man who actually walks. You're nothing but dead weight, a cripple who can't even cut his own food. I won't waste my life with a man who has nothing. Daniel is everything you'll never be. Those were the venom-laced words Amanda Miles spat at her crippled husband, not knowing that the man she mocked was heir to a $500 million inheritance. What Jonathan did next shocked her, humiliated her new lover, and left an entire neighborhood whispering in disbelief. Viewers, have you ever been written off by someone you loved only for life to prove them wrong? How do you respond when betrayal hits you like a blade to the chest? Do you forgive, or do you make them regret every word? She looked into her crippled husband's eyes and spat venom. I can replace you in 24 hours. Amanda Miles thought she was mocking a broken man who had nothing left to give, but what she didn't know was that Jonathan Miles was heir to a hidden fortune of $500 million. A man once dismissed as worthless was about to shock everyone who laughed at him, starting with the very woman who betrayed him. But who exactly was Jonathan Miles before the accident that changed his life? How could a man bound to a wheelchair hold such a staggering secret? Why did his own wife gamble their marriage on another man's promises? And what would Jonathan do when the truth finally came crashing into the light? The Miles family dining room was supposed to smell of roasted chicken and garlic bread, but instead it reeked of tension. The polished chandelier above cast a soft glow over the mahogany table, reflecting off crystal glasses filled with untouched wine. Jonathan Miles sat in his wheelchair at the head of the table, carefully sawing at his steak with hands that shook more than he liked to admit. Every squeak of the chair's wheels, every clink of silverware seemed to echo louder than the low hum of the dishwasher in the next room. Across from him, Amanda tapped her manicured nails against her glass, each click sharp and impatient. Her lips, painted a bold crimson, curled into a sneer as she watched her husband struggle. God, Jonathan, she finally snapped, voice slicing through the silence. Look at you. You can't even cut your own food properly. Do you realize what it's like being married to this? She gestured dismissively toward the wheelchair, the word left hanging in the air like a curse. Jonathan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His eyes lowered to his plate, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the knife. From the staircase, partially hidden by the railing, their teenage son Ethan watched with wide, unblinking eyes. He was supposed to be doing homework, but the venom in his mother's voice pinned him in place. His fists clenched at his sides, nails digging into his palms. Amanda wasn't finished. Her words came faster now, bitter, rehearsed. You used to be a man, Jonathan. Now you're nothing but a burden. I could replace you in 24 hours with a man who actually walks, who actually provides. Daniel, she smirked, letting the name linger. Daniel Cole knows how to treat a woman. He's everything you'll never be. At the mention of the neighbor's name, Ethan's stomach twisted. Daniel, the polished bank manager with the flashy car and the arrogant smile. He'd seen his mom laugh too loudly at Daniel's jokes, stand a little too close at the fence. Now the pieces clicked together, and Ethan felt a heat rising in his chest that burned worse than shame. Jonathan didn't react. He didn't raise his voice, didn't slam his fists. Instead, he reached down beside his chair and touched the worn leather handle of his old briefcase, tucked discreetly against the wheel. It was a subtle movement, almost invisible, but his grip lingered there. Amanda misread the silence as weakness and scoffed. Pathetic, she muttered, draining her wine. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to yell, to scream at his mother, to defend his father. But Jonathan's eyes lifted just enough to meet his son's through the railing. It was only for a second, but it said everything. Not now. Stay strong. Jonathan set his utensils down, carefully folded his napkin, and looked straight at Amanda. His voice was steady, softer than expected. You've made yourself clear. He wheeled back from the table, the chair squeaking against the hardwood. His hand brushed the briefcase handle again before he disappeared down the hallway, leaving Amanda smirking in victory, and Ethan frozen in confusion. What was inside that briefcase? The following Saturday morning, the Miles' backyard was alive with the sound of laughter that didn't belong to Jonathan. Amanda stood by the white picket fence, her sundress bright against the green lawn, her hair loose and flowing in the breeze. Beside her, Daniel Cole leaned casually with one arm propped on the fence post, his polished watch glinting under the sunlight. He was everything Jonathan wasn't: tall, athletic, confident. His voice carried easily, loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. Jonathan sat in his wheelchair on the porch, a newspaper open on his lap. From where he sat, he could hear every word. He didn't need to read between the lines. Amanda wasn't hiding her amusement. You know, Daniel, she said, her laugh sharp and practiced, A man's value is measured by his drive, his ambition. Some men just lose it. She tilted her head back, laughing as if the words weren't poison. Daniel smirked, his eyes flicking briefly toward Jonathan before he replied, "A man's value, Amanda, is his bank account." End of story. Amanda's hand brushed his arm, and she let out a giggle so light it almost sounded rehearsed. From the porch, Jonathan kept his gaze fixed on the newspaper, though the pages hadn't turned in 10 minutes. His hand shifted slightly to the side, brushing the briefcase resting against his chair. That quiet touch again. That silent secret. Upstairs, Ethan leaned out of his bedroom window, watching his mother laugh at the neighbors' jokes. His jaw tightened, his young face hardening with something he hadn't known he could feel toward his own mother, resentment. He whispered under his breath, "She's not even hiding it." Amanda finally turned and noticed Jonathan on the porch. Her expression flickered, just for a moment before she plastered on her smile again. "Jonathan," she called sweetly, "Daniel was just telling me about the new branch he's opening downtown. Isn't it exciting to see ambition up close?" Jonathan folded the newspaper carefully, placed it on the side table, and looked straight at Daniel. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Ambition without honor is just arrogance, Amanda." The words landed heavier than his tone suggested. For the first time, Daniel's smirk faltered. He shifted his weight, clearing his throat, but Amanda quickly filled the silence with another laugh, desperate to erase the moment. Jonathan wheeled himself back inside, the screen door slamming shut behind him. Amanda rolled her eyes at Daniel as if to say don't mind him. But inside, Jonathan didn't roll into despair. He rolled straight to his office. On the desk sat a stack of documents, untouched but waiting. He ran his fingers over the embossed seal at the top. Whitmore Holdings Estate Settlement. Confidential. He exhaled, the sound trembling but resolute. If she only knew, he whispered to himself. What secret was Jonathan guarding so carefully, and how long could he keep it hidden? Jonathan's office smelled faintly of old leather and dusted books. The blinds were half drawn, casting striped shadows across the desk where the sealed documents rested. He sat in silence, staring at the gold-embossed lettering, Whitmore Holdings Estate Settlement. Confidential. His hand trembled as he reached out, but instead of opening it, his mind drifted back to the day everything changed. The crash came first. A steel beam shrieking as it buckled, the sound ripping through the construction site like a thunderclap. Jonathan, then 35 and strong, had been a foreman with a reputation for keeping his men safe. That day safety cost him everything. 2 of his crew were trapped under scaffolding that had collapsed. Without thinking, Jonathan sprinted across the gravel, ignoring the falling debris. He shoved one man clear, dragged the other by his vest, and then, crack. The beam slammed into his back. A flash of pain, blinding, unending. He remembered screaming, then nothing but sirens and the copper taste of blood. When he woke weeks later in a sterile hospital room, he couldn't feel his legs. Amanda had been there, tears streaking her face, clutching his hand. But behind those tears was something else, fear. Not for his life, but for what their future now looked like. Years passed, and Amanda's love thinned like old paint. She blamed the chair, the hospital bills, the endless adjustments. What she never knew, what Jonathan never told her, was that the accident had changed more than his body. The company had been sued, and as part of a confidential settlement, Jonathan received a minority stake in Whitmore Holdings, a conglomerate his late father had quietly invested in decades before. At first, it seemed like nothing more than complicated paperwork. But when Jonathan's father passed, the settlement clauses activated. His father's estate merged with his own holdings and the shares ballooned in value. The will was sealed until a specific date, chosen by his father with chilling foresight, 5 years from the day of Jonathan's accident. That date was just 2 weeks away. The inheritance, nearly $500 million in diversified assets, would pass entirely into Jonathan's control. He'd never told Amanda. Not because he didn't trust her back then, but because his father's lawyer had warned him, wait. Let people show you who they are before the money arrives. Jonathan had waited. He had watched. And Amanda had revealed more than he ever wanted to know. Back in the office, Jonathan leaned back in his chair. The weight of memory pressed on him as heavily as the beam had years ago, but now it was paired with something sharper, resolve. He whispered, barely audible, "You'll see soon enough, Amanda." He touched the embossed seal on the envelope, slid it into the briefcase and locked it shut. Upstairs, Ethan tiptoed past the office door, catching just enough of his father's words to pause. He pressed his ear to the door, eyes widening. He didn't understand yet, but he knew his father was hiding something big. What would Amanda do in the 2 weeks before Jonathan's secret exploded into the open? The neighborhood was alive with chatter, clinking glasses, and the soft notes of a jazz band echoing through the community clubhouse. It was the annual summer party, a gathering Jonathan usually dreaded. But Amanda had insisted they attend. "It looks bad if we don't show up," she had said, slipping on her pearl earrings. Now, under twinkling string lights, Amanda glowed. She floated through conversations, her laugh crisp, her glass never empty. Daniel Cole wasn't far, shadowing her like a trophy waiting to be claimed. Jonathan wheeled himself slowly across the room, greeting neighbors with polite nods. His presence drew sympathetic smiles, but Amanda's eyes narrowed with irritation every time his chair squeaked across the polished floor. By the buffet table, Amanda's voice rose just enough for everyone to hear. "Excuse me," she said with a dramatic sigh, "could someone move that chair? It's blocking the walkway." She didn't mean a chair from the table. She meant him. A hush rippled through the small crowd. Jonathan froze, hand tightening on the wheel rim. Daniel smirked, stepping in as if to rescue her. "I'll help him out of the way," he offered, but the smirk said something else entirely. "You don't belong here." Amanda leaned close to Daniel, her voice dripping with venom disguised as pity. "This is what I mean. Dead weight. A cripple can't give me the life I deserve." The word cripple landed like a slap. Gasps cut through the air. Someone set down their drink too hard, the glass clinking sharply. Jonathan looked around, neighbors shifting uncomfortably, eyes darting between him and Amanda, unsure where to rest. Pity swirled in their expressions, but pity wasn't what he wanted. He straightened in his chair, his face unreadable. "Thank you, Amanda," he said softly, his tone calm enough to silence the whispers. His eyes flicked to Daniel. "And thank you, Daniel, for taking such good care of my wife." The remark, polite on the surface, dripped with an irony sharp enough to cut glass. Amanda blinked, thrown off. Daniel's smirk faltered, his hands slipping from her waist. A few neighbors stifled awkward coughs, others turned their heads, pretending to fuss with the buffet. Jonathan didn't wait for a response. He wheeled himself toward the exit, movements slow but steady. His calm composure stung more than any shouted argument could have. Ethan, standing near the back with a soda in his hand, felt pride swell in his chest. His dad hadn't crumbled. He had stood tall without standing at all. Amanda, cheeks flushed with a cocktail of anger and embarrassment, raised her glass to mask her shaking hand. "Ignore him," she muttered to Daniel. But her laugh this time was brittle, hollow. Outside, Jonathan paused under the moonlight. He exhaled, his breath fogging slightly in the cool air. He whispered to himself, "Just a little longer." His hand brushed the locked briefcase on his lap. What was Jonathan waiting for, and how much further would Amanda push before the secret shattered everything? The city skyline shimmered in the afternoon sun, mirrored across the glass towers that pierced the clouds. Jonathan's wheelchair hummed softly as the elevator carried him to the 42nd floor of a downtown office building. His reflection in the mirrored walls looked sharper today, his suit pressed, his jawline set with quiet determination. The old briefcase rested on his lap, its leather worn but still dignified. When the elevator doors opened, a receptionist in a navy blazer greeted him with a warm smile. "Mr. Miles, they're expecting you." She gestured toward a pair of double doors carved from oak. Inside, the office smelled faintly of polished wood and paper ink. Bookshelves lined the walls, and a panoramic window overlooked the bustling streets below. At the center sat Harold Whitaker, his father's trusted lawyer, a man whose silver hair and steady gaze carried decades of secrets. "Jonathan," Harold said, rising from his chair to shake his client's hand. "Right on time." Jonathan positioned his wheelchair at the desk. His hand instinctively rested on the briefcase. "It's been a long 5 years, Harold." Harold nodded, sliding a thick folder across the desk. The papers inside bore embossed seals and signatures. "As of midnight, all restrictions lift. You will gain full access to your father's estate. Liquid assets, properties, and of course, the majority shares in Whitmore Holdings. Current valuation, just under $500 million. The words settled heavy in the air. Jonathan exhaled slowly, his shoulders sinking. He'd known it was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. $500 million, Harold said softly. It could change everything. Jonathan's eyes darkened, his voice steady. It will change everything. But not in the way Amanda thinks. Harold raised a brow. She still doesn't know? Jonathan shook his head. If I told her, she would have hidden her contempt. Pretended to love me. My father warned me, Money doesn't change who people are, it reveals it. His eyes flicked to the skyline, reflecting the weight of the past 5 years. Now I know who she really is. Harold leaned back, fingers steepled. And what do you plan to do once the inheritance is yours? Jonathan smiled faintly, the first true smile in months. I plan to let her believe she's already won. And then I'll let the truth show her just how wrong she was. The lawyer studied him for a moment, then nodded with respect. Just remember, Jonathan, revenge burns fast. Justice burns slow. Decide which flame you want. Jonathan closed the folder, slid it into the briefcase and locked it with a click. His gaze was firm now, sharper than ever. I don't want revenge, Harold. I want freedom. As he left the office, the sun dipped lower, painting the skyline in gold. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt lighter. Midnight was coming. And with it, the unveiling of everything Amanda thought she knew. What would Amanda do if she discovered Jonathan's quiet trip to the city, and that her pathetic burden was about to become untouchable? Rain wasn't falling, but the sound inside Jonathan's chest felt like a storm. He sat in his office, the briefcase locked on his lap, when Amanda barged through the doorway without knocking. Her perfume preceded her, sweet but sharp, the kind of scent that lingers even after the wearer is gone. Enough of this charade, she snapped, tossing a folder onto his desk. Divorce papers. The word screamed louder than her voice ever could. Jonathan looked down at the papers, then up at her. His face betrayed nothing. Amanda paced the office, arms folded tightly. I'm done pretending, Jonathan. You're pathetic. I'm tired of pushing your wheelchair through life while you play the martyr. You've become nothing. And guess what? I can replace you in 24 hours. She smirked, venom dripping from every syllable. Daniel already offered me the life I deserve. The name landed like a dagger. Ethan, standing in the hallway with his earbuds dangling around his neck, froze mid-step. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but his mother's tone rooted him to the spot. His fists clenched at his sides, his breathing shallow. Jonathan's hands rested calmly on the briefcase. Is that what you really want, Amanda? His voice was low, steady, frighteningly composed. Amanda laughed cruelly. Don't try to guilt me with your saint act. Sign the papers. The house is mine. You can roll away into obscurity and maybe, just maybe, some charity will pity you enough to keep you fed. Her words sliced through the air, sharper than any knife. She leaned forward, pointing her finger at him, eyes burning with contempt. Do you hear me, Jonathan? You are replaceable. For the first time, Jonathan's eyes narrowed. Not anger, not despair, but something stronger, a quiet defiance that unsettled her. He reached for the pen, signed his name on the dotted line with one clean stroke and closed the folder. Amanda blinked, caught off guard. That's it? You're not even going to fight for me? Jonathan closed the pen, placed it neatly beside the papers and finally spoke. I wouldn't fight for someone who already left me. The words froze her smirk. For a split second, her confidence cracked. But she quickly recovered, scooping up the papers and clutching them like a trophy. Good, she hissed. Because tomorrow Daniel and I are leaving for Miami. And you? You'll still be stuck here. Alone. She stormed out, heels clicking down the hall. Ethan darted away just in time, heart pounding as he hid in his room. He wanted to scream, to tell his father not to let her win. But Jonathan's calm silence after Amanda's storm said more than any words could. Jonathan sat there, hands resting on the locked briefcase. His jaw tightened. Midnight was only days away. He whispered to himself, almost a vow. She has no idea what's coming. Amanda believes she's already won. But what shocking move is Jonathan planning once the inheritance unlocks? The ballroom glowed like a jewel box, chandeliers spilling golden light across marble floors, champagne bubbling in crystal flutes, the air humming with the quiet arrogance of the city's elite. Amanda stepped through the grand doors with Daniel at her side, her dress a shimmering silver that caught every flash of the cameras. Tonight was the night, she told herself. Tonight she would be free of Jonathan, tied instead to a man of power and wealth. Daniel squeezed her waist, whispering, After tonight, everyone will know who you belong to. His smugness wrapped around her like a snake. She smiled, imagining herself as the center of attention, adored and envied. Then the announcement came. Ladies and gentlemen, the host's voice rang out, please welcome to the stage our newest majority shareholder, the man now holding the largest stake in Whitmore Holdings, Mr. Jonathan Miles. The room shifted. Applause erupted, cameras snapped, and Amanda's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble. Across the room, Jonathan appeared. No wheelchair this time, Instead, a sleek motorized chair, tailored suit, and an aura of quiet authority. Two executives flanked him like bodyguards. The spotlight hit his face, and for the first time in years, Amanda saw not a burden but a man who commanded the room. Daniel's jaw slackened. "Jonathan?" he muttered, stunned. Jonathan wheeled forward, his voice calm but steady, amplified by the microphone. "My father taught me something long ago. Wealth doesn't create character, it reveals it. For years I've lived quietly, unseen. But tonight, you all see me as I am, and as my father always knew I would be." Gasps rippled through the crowd as screens lit up, displaying the valuation figures, the sealed inheritance, the documents transferring power. $500 million. $500 million. Jonathan was no crippled burden anymore. He was one of the most powerful men in the room. Amanda's legs shook beneath her gown. Her face paled as realization clawed at her chest. Every insult, every word she'd spat at him now rang back in her ears like a curse. Jonathan's eyes found hers across the ballroom. For a second, the world seemed to hold its breath. His gaze wasn't cruel, wasn't triumphant. It was calm, detached, and that cut deeper than rage ever could. Amanda stumbled forward, desperate to reach him, desperate to rewrite the past. "Jonathan," she called out, voice cracking. "Jonathan, wait. I didn't mean." But Jonathan turned his microphone off, handed it to an aide, and rolled past her without a word. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, whispers trailing in his wake. Daniel, seeing the tide turn, pulled his arm from Amanda's waist. "You didn't tell me he was rich," he hissed, disgust dripping from his voice. He stepped back, leaving her trembling and alone in the spotlight that moments ago she had craved. Would Amanda chase after Jonathan, or would his cold silence become the punishment she could never escape? The night air outside the ballroom was crisp, carrying the faint scent of roses from the hotel's garden. Limousines lined the curb, chauffeurs holding doors open for the elite filing out. Jonathan's motorized chair hummed softly as he descended the ramp, the glow of the marquee lights haloing him like a man reborn. Behind him came hurried footsteps. "Jonathan." Amanda's voice cracked the night like glass. Her heels clattered against the pavement as she ran, her silver gown swishing around her ankles. She grabbed his armrest, forcing him to stop. The cameras from inside hadn't followed. This was raw, private. Her face was streaked with tears now, mascara smudged, her lips trembling. "Jonathan, please, listen to me. I didn't mean any of it. I was scared, I was angry. I still love you." Jonathan turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. Gone was the softness she once exploited. His gaze was steady, cold, like steel tempered by fire. "You loved what I never told you," he said quietly. "You loved the idea of security, not me. You saw a cripple. The world saw a burden. But what I see now," he shook his head, exhaling deeply, "I see a woman who revealed herself when she thought I had nothing left." Amanda's hands shook as she reached for him, her fingers brushing his sleeve. "We can fix this. We can be happy again. I'll stand by you." Jonathan cut her off, his voice low but firm. "Stand by me? Amanda, you left me long before you signed those papers. You mocked me in front of neighbors, our son, strangers. Do you think money erases that?" Her breath hitched. "I was wrong. I was stupid. Daniel, he doesn't matter. You matter." At the mention of Daniel, Jonathan's jaw tightened. He pulled his armrest from her grip, rolling closer to the waiting limousine. "Daniel mattered enough when you laughed at his jokes, let him hold you in front of everyone. He mattered enough when you told me I was replaceable." Amanda's knees buckled and she dropped to the pavement, the silver fabric of her gown pooling around her like spilled mercury. Passers-by slowed, whispering, eyes wide at the sight of a woman begging a man she had once belittled. Jonathan paused, watching her crumble. For a flicker of a moment, pity crossed his face, but then his eyes hardened again. "Amanda," he said, voice steady as stone, "you didn't lose me tonight. You lost me the moment you traded love for pride." The limousine door opened. Jonathan rolled inside without another word. The door shut with a thud that echoed through Amanda's chest. She knelt there in the street, mascara streaks glistening under the hotel lights, watching the taillights disappear into the night. Her sobs broke through the hum of the city, raw and unrestrained. Daniel had already stepped back inside the ballroom. Would Amanda be left truly alone, abandoned by both men in one night? Amanda woke the next morning with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, Daniel's name flashing across the screen. Relief surged through her. Maybe he'd come around, maybe she hadn't lost everything. She answered quickly. "Daniel, last night was a mistake." His voice cut her off, cold and clipped. You lied to me. You paraded me around while your husband was sitting on $500 million. Do you know how that makes me look? Amanda's breath caught. Daniel, please, I didn't know. I swear I thought he was. A cripple with nothing? Daniel snapped. That's what you told me. Now the whole city sees me as the fool who chased another man's wife for scraps. Tears welled in Amanda's eyes. Don't leave me, Daniel. We can still. But the line went dead. Just like that, he was gone. Amanda dropped the phone, her hands trembling. She stumbled to the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Mascara streaked, hair tangled, her silk gown from last night wrinkled and cheap in the morning light. Outside, the neighborhood hummed with whispers. By noon, everyone knew. At the grocery store, people avoided her eyes. At the salon, conversations died when she walked in. She was no longer the envied wife of a successful man. She was the woman who mocked her crippled husband and lost him to fortune and dignity. Meanwhile, Jonathan's life shifted like a tide. He moved into a modern home on the edge of the city, its wide hallways and adaptive design giving him freedom he hadn't felt in years. But more importantly, he turned his wealth into purpose. He founded the Miles Foundation, dedicated to helping disabled veterans and accident survivors rebuild their lives. Cameras captured him cutting the ribbon at the opening ceremony, Ethan at his side, pride written across the boy's face. Reporters asked questions, flashes lit up the scene, but Jonathan's answers remained grounded. This isn't about me, he said, his voice carrying strength. It's about proving that limits don't define us. Dignity does. Later that night, Ethan hugged his father tightly, eyes glistening. Dad, you're stronger than any man I know. Jonathan's throat tightened. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. I only kept standing, Ethan, because of you. Back across town, Amanda sat alone in her dim living room. Bills piled on the coffee table. The house that once sparkled with dinner parties now echoed with silence. For the first time, she realized Jonathan hadn't been her burden. She had been his. The irony cut deeper than any of her cruel words ever had. With her world crumbling and Jonathan thriving, would Amanda attempt one last desperate move to crawl back into his life, or had the door already closed forever? The city skyline glowed against the dusk, the streets alive with the hum of life. Inside the Miles Foundation headquarters, Jonathan sat in his office, overlooking the courtyard where dozens of veterans and families mingled after the day's event. Laughter drifted through the open window, the kind of laughter that felt earned, not bought. His motorized chair hummed softly as he rolled closer to the window. On his desk sat framed photos of Ethan smiling at the ribbon cutting, and beside it, the worn briefcase. He hadn't opened it in weeks. The inheritance papers inside had served their purpose. Now the briefcase was just leather and memory. The door creaked open. Ethan peeked in. Dad? You coming down? Jonathan smiled. In a minute, son. Ethan crossed the room, his voice quieter now. Mom called again today. I didn't answer. Jonathan's expression didn't shift, but his hand tightened on the armrest. You don't need to shield me from her, Ethan. She made her choice. Ethan hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on him. Do you still love her? Jonathan exhaled, gazing at the fading horizon. Love doesn't disappear, Ethan. But sometimes, people bury it so deep under pride and greed that it suffocates. The woman I loved, she disappeared long before the world saw it. Silence stretched for a moment before Jonathan's eyes softened. But what matters is this, we survived her leaving. And sometimes survival is stronger than love. Ethan nodded, eyes glistening. He hugged his father tightly, whispering, I'm proud of you, Dad. Jonathan closed his eyes, holding his son. No, Ethan. I'm proud of us. Across town, Amanda sat in a diner booth alone, staring at a cold cup of coffee. Her phone buzzed with overdue notices, her once flawless nails chipped from stress. She scrolled through social media, Jonathan's name trending, photos of him at the foundation's launch plastered everywhere. His smile wasn't bitter. It wasn't gloating. It was genuine. And that broke her more than his silence ever could. She whispered to herself, voice hoarse. He won without me. The waitress asked if she wanted a refill. Amanda shook her head, her eyes filling. For the first time in her life, she realized she had nothing left to trade. Back at the foundation, Jonathan finally left his office, joining Ethan in the courtyard. The night sky stretched wide above them, stars flickering like promises. He looked at the families, the veterans, the children running free, and he felt lighter than he had in years. He spoke softly, almost to himself, but loud enough for Ethan to hear. Strength isn't measured by how far you walk, but by how you rise when you're broken. The words hung in the air, not as a speech but as a truth. Jonathan lost his wife but found his worth. Amanda chased comfort and lost everything. And in the end, it wasn't wealth that defined them, it was character. Tell me in the comments, would you rather have someone love you for who you are, even if you had nothing, or love you for what you have, knowing it could vanish tomorrow?